bleed green? Are you an ultimate Eagles football fan? Well, you're in the right place. Ready? This is Birds 365, hosted by the new Mac and Mac, Jody McDonald and John McMullen.
Here we go.
Who collectively have covered and talked about more than 50 plus years of Eagles football. Kick off your day with Birds 365. You'll get debate.
We love to argue.
You'll get the real story from inside the locker room. And you'll hear from some of the great football minds from around the region. You're about to become an Eagles insider. Get in the game. Join Jody Mack and Johnny Mack and join the football community that flocks to Birds 365. Birds 365 starts right now.
Welcome to the NFL. Let's go. Go. And a good morning, Eagle Nation. You got a Thursday edition of Birds 365 coming your way here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel with the Mac and Mac Bros. Key of Thursday being we are now exactly 5 weeks away from the NFL draft. Kicks off on a Thursday night. Day 2 is Friday, and then they clean up the rest of their stuff over the weekend. It's still 5 weeks. Doesn't it feel like it's about 5 days away, Johnny Mack, or is that just wishful thinking on my part?
I'm way behind on the draft, so not for me. Okay. Because the Eagles
you need those full 5 weeks, huh?
The Eagles made such a significant run. I mean, typically that's when reporters like us, we gear up for the draft. Other teams, you got plenty of time. You start to look at players, but you make that deep run and you're like, woof, stuff goes quick, man. But, that's good.
I didn't get a chance to see. I was busy yesterday during the day, the pro day at Ohio State, but I saw the highlights thereafter. I'm telling you, I'm going to be proven right. From before the season ever started, I said C.J. Stroud is the best quarterback in this year's draft. And if he is not taken number one by the Carolina Panthers, they will have made a mistake. But that's just me. But that does not affect the Eagles at all because they already have their quarterback. The question is, when will they get that contract done? And that's something we'll be talking about for the next 5 weeks. Plus, it's going to go past the draft as well. But Stroud did look good, but there were some other Ohio State guys, especially on the offensive line, that could absolutely.
I like how you describe pro day highlights, Jody. I'm like, what are we learning at pro day?
There are no lowlights at the pro day. Is that what you're trying to tell me, Johnny?
My favorite pro day of all time is probably there was such hype over Johnny Manziel's pro day. Remember that thing? He's throwing over brooms. Oh, look at him throw over the broom. I'm like, what are we doing here? I mean, I'm CJ Stroud's going to be the number one pick. That's pretty obvious. I mean, Carolina's trending in that direction. And we'll see if he develops into a superstar quarterback. He's got a lot of talent. I have no issues with your thought process of him should being the number one overall pick because, look, I'm a little concerned. I think it's right to be concerned over the size of Bryce Young. You can look at Kyler Murray and say, there's some limitations there, and that guy's ridiculously athletic, but there's still some limitations when you're that small playing that position. So I agree with you on Stroud being number one overall, but not because of anything that happened at that pro day. I'll tell you that.
Johnny Mack, he moved the needle yesterday. I agree with your general sentiment that pro days are overrated, and good luck trying to find some since they're controlled and the player gets
the scripted throws. I did see who scripted it. Was it? Did you see who scripted the throws? I forget.
No,
I'll look it up. There are certain guys. John Beck's one of them that script the throws, for the pro days, and I did see who scripted CJ's throws, but I got to look it up now.
He's got the goods, and yes, if you're an Eagle fan, you'd prefer if you believe that there's. And again, I start evaluating these guys before the year ever starts, and I've always said that it's a 2-quarterback draft, and then there's a drop off. Even though the drop off in the actual draft could be negligible, could be the next 2 picks. Quarterbacks could go 1, 2, 3, 4. Good luck to 3 and 4. They are not as good as 1 and 2, even though you're right. Young is a little undersized. We've seen undersized guys like Russell Wilson make it big time in the NFL. So I think Young's going to be really good too, just not as good as Stroud. I don't feel nearly as confident about either Will Levis or Anthony Richardson. But like I said, we got 5 weeks to get there. And the only effect they truly have on the Eagles, and it's almost become a non-effect, is that a month ago, 2 months ago, while the season was just ending up, there was a question as to how many quarterbacks were going to go in the draft in the first 9 picks. Would it be 4, which would mean only 5 other players would be drafted, which would mean the Eagles would get, theoretically, the 6th best non-quarterback player? Well, that's going to be the case because the 4 quarterbacks are all going in the top the 9 picks. They may go in the first 4 or 5 picks. So the Eagles will get the player that they're supposed to get. Again, we're doing speculation on this now, and it's probably a little premature since we're 5 weeks out. You don't think there's any chance that Howie Roseman's going to trade up, do you? Do you think there'll be a player in that group? You and I talked yesterday. You talked extensively about groups, and the Eagles have groups, players in groups, and it changes from year to year. And they may target, let's get one of these guys. You don't think they're going to move up, do you? I think it's.
I do not think they're going to move up. I think it's much more likely if they do anything, they're going to go down. They want to add some mid-round picks. I look at that. Who would that player be to move up for? I just don't see the huge difference. I mean, they sort of staked their claim at cornerback for the next 2 seasons at least. Doesn't mean they couldn't take a cornerback because, you know, we know Howie and luxury picks, and he's going to take who he thinks the best player. But if they like one of the cornerbacks, if they like one of the edge rushers, one of the defensive tackles, but I can't see them moving up. And Bijan Robinson, my buddy Ed Kratz is desperately trying to get him Bijan Robinson. It's just not going to happen, people. Stop it. You know, unless he starts balling, and then you can have a conversation, but not at 10, and they're certainly not going up to get a running back. So yeah, I would say it's much more likely that they go down than up in the draft. But hey, you always leave that one sliver of a door open that they fall so completely in love with a player that they need this particular player. And again, it's way too early in the process. Haven't even heard many whispers. You know, last year I had a good feel for Jordan Davis. Had a real good feel for Jordan Davis. Real good feel for Cam Jurgens. I picked them both in my mock draft, first round, second round. And it wasn't by accident. It was, you know, those mock drafts when I do them later in the process.
The key there being later. If you do it later, you've got better information. You got a better chance to get it right. Oh, and guess what? You got them right.
Yeah, and my mock drafts aren't what I would do. It's what I think the Eagles will do. That's how I kind of do it, because who the hell cares who I want? Ultimately, it's about who that team wants. And you get a better feel, later in the process. I haven't heard many whispers other than, you know, the typical offensive defensive line. I mean, that's the Eagles, and they believe in it, and that part of it's true.
And I'm a big mock draft fan, have been for 25 years. But I try and keep it in its proper perspective. Some people see a mock draft. Oh, the Eagles are taking this guy. No, they're not. That's just one man's opinion. 2.5 months ahead of time. It's just for conversational purposes and debate. It doesn't mean or lock the Eagles into anything. And anything, John. And I say 5 weeks out, and we are 5 weeks out from the draft officially today, is just that, a quasi-educated opinion that means nothing because a lot can change between now and the draft. All right, something did change in the NFL yesterday, at least the possibility thereof. I asked you on Monday here on the show, is there any chance of a return of the Green Goblin to Philadelphia? We've seen a lot of guys leave this year via free agency. We've seen a couple very good Eagles retained, a couple of new additions that John's had a chance to talk to. They've been introduced to the Philadelphia media. I want to get his take on that in a second. But the one thing we haven't seen is an old hand coming back, because the Eagles have done that before, brought back guys who had been here and left and give them another shot, a second run. And when Jalen Mills was released by the Patriots, made some sense to at least debate and think about how he would fit in returning safety, a position of need for the Philadelphia Eagles. And that didn't happen. 4 days later, much like Darius Slay. In Jalen's case, he actually got released and was on the open market for a couple of days, but ended up renegotiating and re-signing with the New England Patriots, who have said they're planning on moving him to safety, which is where he would have played for the Eagles. And he come back here. He's been playing corner the last several years for the Patriots. Did the Eagles miss out on the return of the Green Goblin?
I don't think it would have been a bad signing if they signed him. But, he got probably too much money on his restructure for what they're, if you look at Justin Edmonds. And I haven't seen his contract, but I'm going to guarantee it's for the minimum or maybe a little bit more. With Jalen, he can make up to $6 million. So there's a pretty big difference from the money standpoint. But, he knows how to play, very smart player, good leader. The Eagles know that. That's that's important. Not, it's not the first thing in line, but it's something nice that you always like to have, a good locker room guy. And he's got that safety corner versatility they like as well. They really like players like that. Evans has that. He played in the slot last year with the Saints. They always look for those players, those mirrored players, as Jonathan Gannon used to call them. Avante can do it. CJ could do it. And Jalen can do that as well. He's one of those guys, though, that I always say, Jody, I can't figure out. There's certain guys the fan base loves, and if you say even one constructive criticism, go even down, take a step down that path, they will jump down your throat. Oh, this guy's great. This guy's great. This guy's great. And then there's certain players, it's the opposite. And Jalen's one of those players. A lot of Eagles fans didn't like him. And I have no idea why. Because
I know why. I told you the other day, during his time here in Philadelphia, Jalen gave up some really ugly touchdowns. He'd bite on a ball fake,
double move,
come in, double move. Guy gets behind him. You see him chasing from behind, 10 yards behind the wide receiver as he coasts into the end zone. And those indelibly get locked into the Eagles fans' mind. He's always beat. He's always getting burned over the top. He's too big a chance taker. Well, they look past the interceptions that he got and the good passes he defended. The only thing they remember are the plays he got burnt on. And that's why I think some, you're right. It's not the full fan base, but some of the fan base.
Yeah, it's always a small.
Could not stand Jalen Mills.
It's always a small portion. But, I mean, as a 7th-round pick, won a Super Bowl at corner. I mean, these things should not be underrated. I'm by no stretch of the imagination was he a top-tier corner. But by the time he got to free agency and left here, he turned himself into a pretty valuable player, which is why he got the contract he got. So he's one of, I wouldn't have had any problem. He's still relatively young. I wouldn't have had any problem, but for the contract he got or could get, it's obviously we know the numbers. There's a lot of funny money this time around, but that's probably a little bit more expensive than the Eagles wanted to go for his standard of play.
All right, let me run one more guy by you who's in a similar type position. I think your answer will be the same. Yeah, just the money's a little bit too big. Who I think the Eagles may have missed out on yesterday, because there is, at least it's being espoused out there as a theory. I don't know. I would bet the Eagles don't buy into it, but it's not just dismissed out of hand that if the Philadelphia Eagles are going to go 14-3 again this upcoming year, they're going to have to weigh more heavily on their offense. They're going to have to outscore teams. They're going to have to win shootouts. There's going to be a drop-off.
Bijan. That's where Bijan comes in.
Okay. Yeah. I'm not going down the Bijan road. I'm going down a different road. Yesterday, the New York Jets acquired Nicole Hardman via free agency, who has been a very productive receiver for the Kansas City Chiefs. Yeah, he's got a pretty good guy named Mahomes throwing the football to him, but has been a pure slot guy, but has that speed that can take the top off a defense. And, oh, by the way, good return guy as well, something the Philadelphia Eagles kind of lacked last year. He got a one-year deal with the ability, got some incentives in there to raise it up to $6 million. The Eagles could improve over Quez Watkins as their third wide receiver. If you want to really put together an offense that's scary, make him your slot receiver between Devontae and AJ. That would fill the void of, hey, we're going to outscore you week in and week out. We're putting up 38. We think our defense can hold you to 35. Should the Eagles have thought about investing more money in offense, more money in wide receiver, it would kind of tip the scales a little bit, but that could have been huge. Did they miss out on Nicole Hardman?
I've seen no evidence. Mecole, and I like Mecole, but I like him as a player. How much of that is Andy Reid? To me, he's a manufacturer touch guy. And I've seen no evidence that this coaching staff can use a manufactured touch player or wants to use a manufactured touch player. They don't use a lot of motion. They're not going to jet sweep people a ton. We talked about they're at the bottom of the league with motion 2 consecutive years now. So I don't know if they're going to utilize that. Now, maybe it's because they haven't had one. And maybe if they got one, they would use it.
Jalen Reagor wasn't a good manufacturer.
No, he was not. And that's not their fault. But so from that perspective, I have no evidence that he would be a good fit. And he's not going to run routes. Like he's not Julian Edelman. He's not going to beat people in the slot with option routes and cutting on dimes and doing that stuff. So I don't necessarily, we talk about fit all the time, which is not, and I think the offensive staff more than the defensive staff has proven to be malleable, starting with the quarterback, and maybe they would be that with a receiver. So I can't say not, but just from the fact that they barely use motion as it is, I can't imagine they're going to get Mecole Hardman and say, all right, let's turn into San Francisco. Now put them with Kyle Shanahan, I'll say, damn, yeah, give me that. Let me see. They don't need them because they have Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk and everybody else. But Andy Reid, yeah, he's going to utilize them. I don't know. I don't see it as a fit here.
Yeah, I think given a chance, he can be a guy who can get behind defenses even more than he has.
Oh, he can run, but even in Kansas City, his yards per catch were down. I think as a rookie, I'll look it up real quick. As a rookie, he didn't play that much. He didn't get that many. So he's at 20.7 as a rookie. And he just ran by people, sort of like Quez, like a one-trick pony. But in recent years, it's 11-7, 11-9. So, as they tried to, and he got injured, but
11 not bad. 20 is off the charts, but 11's not bad into itself.
And now it's more because like I said, he's a manufactured touch player. He's not running by people. They're utilizing him more, or they were utilizing more, right, giving him the football near the line of scrimmage. I just don't see the Eagles doing that. I mean, they haven't done it. So, but they haven't had that player either.
Correct. And I don't think Mecole Hardman will come in here and be that player, but I think he could be good enough to just get back to getting open over the top and making big plays. Kansas City didn't use him because they were too worried about the controlled touches. I just like the kid, and I think he's going to have a big year, whether it's from Brett Favre or whoever else is the Jet quarterback. It better be
Brett Favre. We'll go Aaron Rodgers.
Aaron Rodgers. Thank you for correcting me. Jody McDonald, John
Brett
McMullen.
could probably still play. He could probably still sling it if he's not in jail.
Here are my choices: Brett Favre, Zach Wilson. Oh, I'll take Brett Favre. Thank you very much. At his advanced age. Mac and Mac here with you on Birds 365. We see in our waiting room one of our faves from Bleeding Green Nation and the Eye on the Enemy podcast, John Stolnis. Haven't had him on since free agency kicked in. We'll ask him to get up to date with his opinions on the new look Eagle roster next here on Birds 365.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
Imagine for a moment that you went to work today and when you came home, you were catastrophically injured. Your life and your family's life. That's what happened to union construction worker Mike Little.
I was scared of what the end was going to be, but to be 100% honest with you, I knew I was going to be all right just by talking with Brian. In my heart, I just knew everything was going to be all right.
Call the firm and find out why they say, "We got this." Call 215-458-2222.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wild wood days.
My name is Fran Salerno, and I'm a managing director here at Del Valle Insurance Group. Been in the business for over 36 years, saving people money on their insurance needs. Give us a call. Let us help you custom design an insurance plan that meets both your needs and budget.
They're carving them up and good play calling along the way. First and goal at the 6.
On the field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Thursday hang on Birds 365. We appreciate you streaming in with the Mac and Mac guys. Go ahead and hit that like button. You got to like it. John Stolnis. Of course you have to hit the like button. Do so immediately. From Bleeding Green Nation and the Eye on the Enemy podcast, John Stolnis joins us. John, how you been enjoying free agency?
It's been a ride, hasn't it? I mean, they haven't been quiet. It's been interesting. There's lots to talk
They're
about.
Never
Absolutely.
quiet, John.
No,
That's
indeed.
the beauty of this team.
Yeah.
Well, let's start with CJ because that was probably the most interesting part. So I want to give you 3 options and then fill in the percentages.
Okay.
When you talk about CJ Gardner-Johnson and what happens. Number 1 would be he just overvalued himself on the markets. Number 2 would be the personality. People have talked about that, the big personality. Maybe the Eagles got a little fed up with throwing Jonathan Gannon under the bus, tweeting and deleting, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And then the third would be just we in Philadelphia overvalued the guy as a player because of the interceptions and the splash plays.
You know, it's funny. I think all of those things are a factor, and I would kind of weight them all pretty evenly. I'd say like a third, a third, a third, because I do think there is a fair amount to all of that. We were in such desperate need for a safety going in training camp last year when CJ GJ arrived. It felt like, oh, we've got the last piece, we've got the final piece to the puzzle, and he did make those splash plays, and we've seen Eagles secondary players these last few years that have failed to capitalize on opportunities. So it was at least good that he was capitalizing on opportunities when they presented themselves. And then when he got hurt, it really seemed like it was a pretty damaging injury. We were looking forward to him coming back. Reed Blankenship played pretty well in his absence, but getting him back on the field for the playoff run, I thought was a good thing. But there's a chance we overvalued him because the need at safety felt like it was so great when they made the trade for him. So that's the first thing. The second thing is during the course of the season, we didn't hear a whole lot from Gardner Johnson in terms of, running his mouth or tweets that he had to delete, which, by the way, don't be a tweet deleter. If you're gonna tweet, keep it up, man. Unless you tweeted something factually inaccurate and then you own it in the next tweet, then don't do that, man. Think before you hit the send button.
Yeah.
But that can be an issue, and I know that was the reported concerns was you sign him to a multi-year deal, he suddenly maybe feels freer to speak out and to tweet out and all that other stuff, and then you've got a headache on your hands. So that might have been part of it, but it does seem like they wanted him back and that they were willing to deal with all of those things for a number. And it certainly sounds like they have a certain amount of money allocated for the different positions on the field or the different spots on the field. And once he turned down their initial offer, they moved on to Bradbury and they moved on to inking in Slay. And then even for $8 million on a one-year deal, for a team that's as cap-strapped as the Eagles are, that's still a significant chunk of the cap for a player that maybe they are not 100% in love with. I think if he were a guy who they loved, they might have done that. But it does sound like that there was a little bit of pumping the brakes for $8 million for him.
And don't know if you saw it. Our buddy Marcus Hayes wrote a good article in the Inquirer a couple of weeks ago talking about how Denard Wilson, the former DB coach here now with the Ravens, kept that room in order, that there were a lot of big personalities in that room, and he kept it at times from blowing up and getting itself in trouble. Of course, he moved on, and the Eagles, I don't want to say pushed him out the door, but they made it easy for him to leave without giving him the defensive coordinator position. Do you think that was part of it? That they said, listen, we kept it under control. John Stolas just said on Birds 365, it wasn't all that bad during the year. CJ didn't blow himself up during the 17-game regular seasons. Well, maybe that was because of Denard Wilson. Do you think the Eagles said, yeah, we walked the tightrope this year, and we probably wouldn't be able to do it again with CJ?
Yeah, it's possible. If Denard Wilson was laying on top of a grenade all season long, I mean, that certainly could be a reason why they decided not to bring him back. And that, it doesn't. And maybe they didn't want to saddle the new defensive coordinator with an issue like that as well. I mean, that's, if you bring Sean Desai in, the job's going to be challenging enough with losing all the players that you're going to lose. And if you're dealing with somebody who's going to make waves in the locker room, that can be an issue. Not knowing exactly what Denard Wilson, how he handled CJ GJ last year. And I think CJ GJ, understanding he was playing for a new contract, thinking he was going to get a multi-year deal, was on his best behavior. So all those factors come into play. And, it is unfortunate. It's head scratching. Would I have rather seen them bring CJ GJ back for $8 million than sign Fletcher Cox for $10 million or whatever it was that he signed for? Yes. But once the die was cast, it really couldn't be re-rolled again.
But talking about the splash plays, and I'll bring the draft and Bijan Robinson, because that was a story this week because he was in for a visit. People like splash plays. It makes sense, right? Fantasy football, touchdowns, interceptions, points, blah, blah, blah. But you bring up Fletch. There's some talk that maybe, John, they're, bringing back the band again. This happened in 2017. Maybe Howie's talked about his loyalty to certain players. Maybe goes a little bit too far. But you talk about the core four of this team, the so-called core four. Where are they? Jason Kelsey, Lane Johnson, Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, offensive line, defensive line. Not as sexy, but this entire sort of foundation of this era of Eagles football, which is pretty good, I know people are disappointed there aren't more Super Bowls, but think about that. There's only one in franchise history. It's a pretty good group as a whole. Why does every spring everybody go down that route? Is it just human nature?
To value the lines, or to
no, I'm saying the splash plays, whether it's CJ's interceptions, whether it's Bijan, dreaming about what he can add to this offense versus the sustained success of what the Eagles do,
right?
Building on the offensive and defensive lines.
Yeah, no, and because the splash plays get the attention, that's what gets the highlights. That's what you remember from a season. And to be fair, in past seasons, before really A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith got here, the offense was exceedingly difficult to watch. In the last couple of years of Carson Wentz being here, it was pulling teeth moving the ball down the field. It just felt like it was such a struggle to get anything happening. And so there was a severe drought of splash plays. And on defense, if you're not getting splash plays, defenses typically are on the field for a really long time, unless you've got a front four like the Eagles had this year, where you're sacking the quarterback and you're able to get the ball back that way. But the splash plays a lot of times are what separates the great teams from the middle of the pack teams. Look at the Giants. The Giants, they can kind of move the football, but there's a cap on how good that offense can be with the talent they have there. Whereas with the Eagles, they can jump, and all of a sudden you've got Jalen Hurts connecting 65 yards. I mean, look in the Super Bowl when the Eagles were down 8, all of a sudden you hit Devontae Smith for a big splash play to get you down to the 1 yard line, and all of a sudden you're in business. So the splash plays are really helpful, but you're right, they are predicated on stability along the line. So I'm a big balance guy in life, just in general, balancing all kinds. And I think you need to strike a balance in football with having enough players on your team that can generate the splash plays, but also making sure that you're not doing that at the expense of making sure your offensive lines and your defensive lines have depth, that they're consistent, and that they're stable. And I think the Eagles are trying to walk that fine line with very limited cap space this year. And they're going to have to hit on some guys in the draft to fill both of those roles. I think you're going to need to find a couple of draft guys that can make a splash play, and you're also going to need to help you with depth and get some guys who can be consistent performers down the road.
JS, I know it's kind of boring. You were talking about how splash plays grab everybody's attention. Oh, we all agree on that. And signing someone from another team always grabs attention. Just retaining your own players isn't near as sexy as taking someone off someone else's team. And they've brought back some very good players, and that's why I still think they're the favorite to go to the NFC. But they've lost players and others as well. What's the biggest loss the Eagles have suffered so far this offseason, in your mind?
I think it's Hargrave. I don't think there's a whole lot of debate about that. I mean, it's funny. I wrote about this week. You would think that losing a running back that piled up 1,200 yards and 11 touchdowns on the ground, more people would be talking about that loss. But people seem to be okay with Miles Sanders leaving, and I feel like behind this offensive line and with the offense this team has, I'm not overly worried about it. So I feel like Javon Hargrave, you're asking Jordan Davis and Milton Williams, and I guess to a degree Fletcher Cox as well, to pick up the slack for Hargrave, who in the 3 years he was here was a monster in the middle, getting to the quarterback at the defensive tackle position. And those guys are really rare. There's a reason he was the number 1 free agent on the market this offseason. It really hurts that he went to San Francisco, because as we saw in the NFC Championship game, if you stop Bosa, you can largely slow down the 49ers defense. But in that case, now you've got a guy in the middle who generates his own pressure. He doesn't rely on the edge rushers crashing and just cleaning up the trash. He creates his own pressure in the middle of the field. So I think that's going to be the biggest loss. That's going to be the hardest for them to replace. I expect them to address the position in the draft, but they're not going to get another Javon Hargrave type season out of any of the guys who are currently on the roster, I don't think, unless we're going to see a big jump from Jordan Davis or a big jump from Milton Williams. I don't see it. I don't know how they replace it. I don't know what they do scheme-wise to make up for that, but they're going to have to figure that out, because them losing him, I think, was by far the biggest loss.
Silver lining, I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit. The Eagles aren't good against the run in general, mainly because they don't care about the run. Right. And they're probably right for the most part. I always joke, nobody cares about the run, offensively or defensively,
until Isaiah Pacheco goes for
what
he did in the second half of the Super Bowl. Then all of a sudden people realize, maybe we should stop the run.
Yeah. As good as Javon was as a pass rusher, he wasn't a good run defender as a defensive tackle. So there's no way. I mean, I put Jordan Davis aside. He's got to be a better player, but he plays a different position. Milton Williams is going to be the guy to get a lot of Javon Hargrave's snaps. You're not going to be the same pass rusher. He's just not. Even with his athleticism, as you mentioned, put Aaron Donald to the side. I mean, Javon's in the conversation for being the best interior pass rusher in the NFL. You're not going to get that from Milton Williams.
Yeah.
He's probably going to be better against the run. And, if my linebackers are Nakobe Dean and Nicholas Morrow and my edge rushers Hassan Reddick, who looks like a wide receiver when you see him standing there, I mean, maybe having somebody in the middle can muck up the running game a little bit. Maybe it's a little bit more important than we think. Am I going too positive there?
No, I think there's a fair amount there to grab a hold of. I mean, for sure, you would want to do better against the run, and we'll see what Sean Desai's philosophy is on this. Whether he's more willing to commit to the run, whether he's more willing to run blitz on occasion when in obvious running situations. The problem with doing that is that, at least with Jonathan Gannon's defense, it was almost totally reliant on the front four getting pressure on the quarterback. If they weren't doing that, offenses had little difficulty moving the football on Jonathan Gannon, at least until they got into the red zone. And generally speaking, against the non-elite quarterbacks, they were able to hold teams to 3 points or get the splash play like we were talking about. But I think if you don't have that front four generating that kind of pass rush, and Javon Hargrave was a huge part of that. It's going to be harder to see how they can generate the sacks that they were able to generate last year. And that was such a huge part of what they do. And this defense is still very incomplete. I mean, I don't think we've got our starting linebackers yet, both of them anyway. I know Morrow will see exactly what his role is going to be, but I know maybe he's the starter, maybe he isn't. The safeties, I think there's still a lot of work to be done there. So we don't know exactly what this is going to look like yet, but I think you're right in that you might get some better success against the run. But in order for this defense to really work, unless Sean Desai is going to change things up and blitz more or have some more exotic plays with the defensive line, they're going to struggle to generate pass rush without Javon Hargrave in there, at least up the middle.
All right, JS, let me give you an alternative to your Javon Hargrave biggest loss theory, which is probably right, but I'm just going to go in a different direction. Certainly, he's the best player that they lost. I'm a huge Edwards fan. I love the Kobe Dean. CJ was a talented player, all other things aside. Here's what I'm nervous about. I think they could miss Shane Steichen, the play caller, more than anything else, comparing one season to the next. Sorry, Brian Johnson. You may do a better job than Shane Steichen, but I haven't seen it. We haven't seen it in the NFL level. He was an okay play caller on the collegiate level. That's different calling plays in the NFL. That scares me a little bit going into the season, and I think they might actually have a tougher time replacing Shane Steichen than any of the players they lost. Am I overreacting?
I think that's fair. I don't think you're overreacting. I do take some solace in the fact that this is Nick Sirianni's offense, and a lot of times the game plan is put together at Sirianni's direction. Now, you're right; the in-game play calling is a huge part of it, and there's a reason Shane Steichen was highly sought after, and why I think most people believe he's going to be a very good head coach in the NFL is his ability to call plays. He really did seem to have a rhythm all season long, knowing how to use Jalen Hurts and when to use the run, when to dial up the big play. So yeah, that's a huge question mark, whether or not Brian Johnson can do it. I do think that, it may not be beautiful right off the bat. There's going to be some growing pains. But at the end of the day, I'm not as worried about it. I don't think maybe as you are, or maybe as some other people are, because I think Johnson seems like a very competent coach. I know obviously the quarterback trusts him. Nick Sirianni trusts him, and it's a collaborative effort, at least up until game day, until, you know, once the ball kicks off and they start calling plays. And I'm sure Nick Sirianni is in the headset with suggestions and whatever. So, you know, this is one of those wait and see things for me. I'm willing to let it play out and, you know, kind of see how it goes. But it's a concern. There's no doubt about it. Whenever you lose a guy who was as talented a play caller as Steichen, there's no guarantee you're going to get somebody who's as good on the other side of it.
Yeah, and I've mentioned that before. I agree with Jody. I think people underestimate how good Shane was. He just has a feel for it. But I will say this, I'm not as concerned because the Eagles are just going to out-talent people on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, they have so many playmakers. The offensive line, if it's not number one, with the move away from Isaac to Cam Jurgens, still going to be top 5. It's still going to be one of the best offensive lines in football. We'll see how the backfield shakes out in theory, if he could ever stay healthy. And maybe it's time for Rashad Penny to get some luck and he does stay healthy. And I think he would be an actual better fit if he could stay on the field. Now, that's a big if. They might draft somebody. I think any running back is going to be relatively effective behind that offensive line. So we'll go back to the defense, John. There are more changes on the defense. We talked about Sean Desai. If Jonathan Gannon was back, if Javon Hargrave was back, if C.J. Gardner-Johnson was back, I don't think they would have had the season they had this year from a statistical standpoint. You mentioned the sacks. They're not getting 70 sacks.
Right.
Even if Javon, they're not getting 70 sacks.
Right.
So there's going to be a regression to the mean, even if everybody was back. And now you've lost 5 starters. I'm really concerned about the defense and poor Sean Desai from the standpoint of the expectations are out of whack. So he's not only got to deal with all the turnover, John, he's got to deal with these unrealistic expectations. That's going to be difficult.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. Are the expectations going to be unrealistic, though, understanding all the players that they've lost? I mean, I feel like I feel like
Eagle fans will move right past that. You'll acknowledge it. I'll acknowledge it. Yeah, the Eagle fans might not.
I'm new here, I guess. Yeah, it's very naive. I'll speak for myself then. I'm not expecting the defense to do what it did last year, but I think that's one of the reasons I'm actually more optimistic that the defense can weather this without Jonathan Gannon, because I think we know what Jonathan Gannon would have done. And I don't, because he was so reliant on that front four to get pass rush and for that his defensive scheme to work, understanding that, of course, you're not going to generate that kind of pass rush again, that you're not going to get those kinds of results again. I'm not sure what other tricks he has in the bag when that's not working. We kind of saw that in the Super Bowl. He doesn't really have a whole lot of other things that he can go to or that he felt comfortable going to when the front four wasn't getting home. So with Sean Desai, I feel more comfortable with the unknown here, because I don't know if he will try some different things. If he is going to figure out different ways to get pressure on the quarterback, or if he is going to force quarterbacks to do something different, to funnel the ball outside the numbers a little bit more than Jonathan Gannon made them do. If Sean Desai is going to force quarterbacks to throw the ball against Slay and Bradbury and Maddox and really use that advantage that they have, instead of letting them pick the defense apart underneath against the linebackers and the safeties, I'm concerned about the defense. There's no doubt about there's a talent drain. I also believe Howie Roseman is going to continue to add pieces, and that this defense is nowhere near the finished product that it looks like right now. And with Sean Desai, I'm hopeful that it's just going to look a little different, and we're going to see things differently than we saw with Jonathan Gannon. And again, until we get closer to training camp and we see who's on the field and we get a sense of what Desai wants to do, I'll wait and see on that as well.
John, we all get now focused during the offseason on what the Eagles are doing, with tunnel vision on what the Eagles are doing.
Yeah.
By the way, a couple of teams in the division have actually had okay off seasons. And I think the Cowboys are the biggest one. They're certainly the closest in the rearview mirror to the Eagles at adding Stephon Gilmore for a day 3 pick and Brendan Cooks for a day 3 pick. Not bad out of Jerry, the general manager down there in Dallas. I'm not saying they've caught the Eagles, but they've narrowed the distance between themselves and the Eagles. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think you have to say that. When you combine what the Eagles have lost to what the Cowboys have gained, I think last season a lot of Cowboys fans were frustrated by the inactivity of the team, and the shoulder. Jerry Jones said, "Yeah, everything's cool. We're good," and not understanding. And we underestimated too what Jalen Hurts was going to be this year. We didn't expect the Eagles to leapfrog the Cowboys necessarily in terms of talent, but I think they're close. Certainly, they've done a lot to help their receiving core. The defense remains strong, so remains to be seen what Gilmore has left in the tank. But he played well last year, and coupling him with Trayvon Diggs, I think it's an interesting conversation. Who has the better cornerback duo in the division? Whether it's Gilmore and Diggs or Slay and Bradbury, that's kind of a fun conversation. The quarterback comparison is a fun conversation. It's funny, you ask anybody to list their top 5 or top 10 NFC quarterbacks, and Jalen Hurts is at the top, and then after that there's a whole wide range of different possibilities for next year, but I think Dak has to be number 2 or number 3. So there's going to be that closeness between these two teams. There is absolutely a scenario where the Cowboys leapfrog the Eagles this year. I mean, we've seen that in this division since 2005, that teams don't win this division 2 years in a row. So I don't think they have, and I think the Eagles will continue to add this offseason and remain the better team with the more competitive roster. I think the coaching staff is also better than what they have in Dallas. But that being said, Dallas always plays Philadelphia tough. Things happen, stuff happens, and the Cowboys have absolutely improved themselves this offseason. Hats off to them. They saw the Eagles hit the Super Bowl last year and decided, no, that's not happening again, and they're being more aggressive than they have been in recent off seasons.
At John Stolness, follow John on Twitter, bleedinggreennation.com. Also, our producer Xander's fired up about the Phillies. Get your Phillies news from John as well. I'll end it with you, John, with the players the Eagles have added. And there's a couple themes. Obviously, they want to go cheap because they want to go those 20. They want to make sure they get their 4 2024 compensatory picks. So we understand that. Yeah. They've also, tried to pick talented players that maybe have had some injury history. Rashad Penny and Justin Evans, former second-round pick. Reedy Williams, former second-round pick. Nick Borrow, a little bit outside of that box as an undrafted free agent, but he's had some injury issues as well. Are the Eagles? I know there's one team that has a better medical staff, and that's the Saints, because they're saving people's lives. That's the third time. John Dorenbos, Nick Barely. Now they found poor Foster Moreau, and good luck to him, diagnosed with lymphoma. Can't say it. Are the Eagles too? Do they have a little bit too much hubris when it comes to their medical staff? They had a great season when it came to, player games lost and, the maintenance days and the load management. It all worked out beautifully. But I do think there's a little bit of luck there. And Rashad Penny, I've said, you know what? That guy, he's due for some good luck. So I'm pretty optimistic about him staying healthy because he's due. He's still a young guy. And we'll see how things shake out. But do you think they're a little bit too haughty when it comes to that kind of stuff?
I think right now, I mean, you see this in other sports too. It's like you're looking for guys who can come back off an injury and have talent, but and can play well. I would rather the Eagles go in that direction than sign aging free agents on cheap deals, because I'm all for upside when it comes to something like a Rashad Penny type signing. I'd rather them go out and get him than go out and get some 33-year-old veteran running back on a 1-year deal or something like that. And you hope that your medical staff, which has shown that they've gotten much better since the Doug Peterson medical staff days, when we were losing player games to injuries more than any other team in the NFL, you're not going to be as healthy as you were last year. I mean, that's another regression that we're going to have to anticipate in 2023. But I think that with these guys that are coming back off of injury, they showed at least last year that they were healthy. I mean, for the penny aside, the defensive ads, they played a majority of games last season. So it's not as if they're coming off an ACL injury that forced them to miss all of last year, and they're hoping the medical staff can rehabilitate them. They're getting some guys who at the early part of their years has showed promise, got hurt last year, played pretty well or played more, and are looking now to kind of springboard that into the next few seasons. I think that's a smart thing to do. You hope that these players, I think the idea is these players are coming in healthy, and then you're just trying to maintain them through, like you said, load management, through workload. And for all the hemming and hawing and hand-wringing last year in the summer about how little the Eagles were practicing, they emerged as one of the healthiest teams in the NFL. So I think they've earned a little bit of that trust with these guys, and we'll see how it shakes out. But I think it's a smart way to build a team when you've got cap issues.
JS, my last question to you is a two-parter. And we've had you on Birds 365. I've had you on my other shows. I don't know that I've ever addressed this with you before. Roger Goodell signing a contract extension with the National Football League. Is that good for the Eagles? Is it good for the National Football League? Roger Goodell is one of those lightning rod kind of guys who people seem to have a strong opinion about. I do. I've shared it before. I'll share it again if need be. What's your opinion on Roger Goodell and the NFL staying under his auspices for the next additional 6, 7, 8 years?
Well, if you're looking at the business side of it, I get it. The NFL has never been healthier. It's never been stronger. I think he's completely tone deaf when it comes to PR, when it comes to handling player suspensions, when it comes to, how much time does Calvin Ridley get suspended for versus Deshaun Watson? And you look at the comparison and the things that they did. I mean, it's just, it's hard to wrap your head around some of the decisions that are made by Goodell and by the front office and league officials. And there certainly are things that about the NFL that I don't like the way they handle a number of different issues from a front office standpoint. As far as the how it affects the Eagles, I don't know that whether it's Goodell or another commissioner, whether or not there's a real impact on Philadelphia in particular. But if there is, happy to hear reasons why. But yeah, if any commissioner, I struggle to think of a commissioner who would be any better. Major League Baseball's commissioner is kind of the same way. These commissioners are all in the pockets of the owners. They don't look out, generally speaking, for what's best for the sport. They look out for what's best for the owners of the sport because they're hired by the owners. Yeah. And so it's hard to say, well, if it wasn't Goodell and you get this guy in there, they're going to be the bastion of what's best for the sport. I just don't think it works that way.
That's true, John. It's like everyone says he's terrible, insert name. Well, who's not going to be terrible in that
He's not going to be terrible.
Yeah.
It's just the nature of the beast with that job. I mean, if you really had a commissioner of a sport should be an ombudsman. They should be a person who is looking out for what's best for the sport, whether that's in the best interest of the owners or the Players Association or the fans. That's just not how it works. No. I think we all understand that. So,
yeah. And I was glad to hear you say it's not everybody hates Philadelphia. Because I get enough of that on the phone. Oh, Goodell stinks. He doesn't like the Eagles.
Yeah,
I will. What other than because you say so? Oh, I don't know. He just doesn't like the Eagles. Yeah,
I will, and I hate when I have to defend Roger Goodell. But one of the things which I think most people don't understand, especially when it comes to punishments, because those are so high profile. You mentioned Calvin Ridley. Some of the punishments are structured. Like the gambling punishment, that's collectively bargained. There's no wiggle room. Whereas the personal conduct issues, there's wiggle room. So, and I get it. Fans will say, well, Calvin Ridley gets suspended for a year and so with domestic violence. That's not Roger's fault. I hate that it's one is structured, one is not. And I don't, the union and the league have to get together to fix that. One has wiggle room, one doesn't. And that's really difficult to explain to people. It really is, because I've been trying to do it for over 2 decades.
And they just don't get it. Johnny, great stuff today. We appreciate you coming on board. Know full well we'll be asking you back well before the draft happens, because 5 weeks from today it gets underway. It'll be here before you know it. We'll get you up for some draft opinions. Appreciate you jumping in and joining us here today.
You bet, guys. Anytime. Thanks.
Thanks,
He
John.
is at bleedinggreennation.com and does a Great Eagle podcast, Eye on the Enemy. John Stolness here with us on Birds 365. All right, Jody Mack coming back a little bit later. We'll get a more national view. Our buddy Mike Tanier from Football Outsiders is going to jump in. McMullen and McDonald coming back here on Birds 365 next.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
I get scared sometimes.
Of a lot of things.
Joining in.
Decisions.
The dark.
The dark.
But I once heard someone say,
But as I always say,
it's okay to be afraid.
as long as you face the fear.
And keep moving forward.
Wherever you are in life, count on the name trusted in insurance for over 80 years. Independence Blue Cross. Is the best vacation one that you find, or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights, or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning. One that lets you find your own rhythm, or get carried away. Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Plan your day with confidence.
Keep the umbrellas on hand.
With Action News and AccuWeather.
Numerous tornadoes.
Your go-to team when severe weather strikes.
The water is still rising.
Keeping you prepared wherever you watch. Action News and AccuWeather, the team you trust.
We all know that taxes are just part of life. It's true during our working years, but also in retirement. But what you might not know is up to 85% of your Social Security benefits might be taxed. Our team at Thrive Financial has helped retire thousands of people across the Delaware Valley by asking questions they never knew they needed to ask, including how their Social Security benefits might be taxed. It's time to be proactive on taxes. Get your Thrive Retirement Tax Playbook today.
As a hardworking American, you've never experienced how tough life can be until now. A catastrophic injury while working on the job. A personal injury from someone else's negligence. Turned away by other law firms in the region who didn't bother to learn your story. It's time to meet the Fritz & Bianculli Law Firm and managing partner Brian Fritz. Badly injured? Call the Fritz & Bianculli Law Firm. Find out why they say, "We got this."
McMullen and McDonald here with you on Birds 365, your Mac and Mac guys. Appreciate everybody streaming in and commenting on our stream. Some of you guys make me laugh. Some of you guys just make me roll my eyes. But we do appreciate your being part of it while we're doing the show. And we appreciate whenever you hit the like button. Go ahead, like, share, and subscribe to your boys on Birds 365. All right, you kind of touch on this with John Stolness. And I want to go a couple steps further with that. I think it was Ruben Frank. It was either Ruben or Dave Zangaro, who on NBC Sports just went a little bit more in depth on. Yes, Eagles have done what they've done during the offseason. Yes, they've kept some good players. Yes, they're still a major favorite to win the NFC again this year, potentially go back to a Super Bowl. But the players that they retained were a little bit old. Darius Slay, age 32, Fletcher Cox, certainly Jason Kelsey, that the Eagles, while we believe that by the time we get to the beginning of the season roster, we'll have some young guys in place playing. They also kept some guys who've got some age on them. Do you buy the theory that the Eagles didn't do enough to churn the roster so far this offseason?
No, not at all. In fact, I'm like, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Jody, I think the Eagles won the NFC Championship. I think they were in the Super Bowl. I think they were within,
tied with 10 seconds to go.
Tied with 10 seconds. They're pretty close in that game. I don't think there's any evidence that you should. Again, this is the Sam Hinkieization of Philadelphia. I mean, everybody's, oh, you didn't win. You got to start thinking about 2025 and 20. What the hell are you talking about? This is still the best team in the NFC. Yes, there are people closing the gap. I would say Dallas and Detroit most notably. But I still wouldn't put them ahead of the Eagles. And everybody knew, including the Eagles first and foremost. Howie Roseman told it to you if you were listening. We're going to lose some players, but that doesn't mean they can't compete. They already had this plan into place. We're going to go. Yes, they have to ultimately be right on Jordan Davis and Milton Williams and Jacoby Dean and Cam Jurgens. And we'll see if they're right or wrong. But they have this mix, and this is what you do in the NFL. Look, you're a competitive team. You get back your core, and we call it the core four. We stole it from baseball and the Yankees, and Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox and Jason Kelsey and Lane Johnson. They're all pro in Jason's case, all pro in Lane's case. Brandon's coming off a double-digit sack season. Fletcher Cox had 7 sacks, which is really good for an interior player. Why the hell are you moving on? You saved $4 million on Fletcher Cox. You saved money on Brandon Graham. You got Kelsey back for an extra $250,000. That's it. That was his raise. And Lane Johnson was already under contract. Why would you move on from any of those 4 players? Any of them? It makes no sense to me. They're still playing at a high level.
The only one out of that core 4 that I thought, and again, you just laying out a comparison. Fletcher Cox, $4 million savings, down from 14 to 10. Well, he wasn't worth 14 million last year, so I don't know that you glorified that savings. Oh, you saved $4 million. Well, but what should you have been paying Fletcher Cox if you're just going to analyze?
Well, I mean, if you analyze the league in that position, like John brought up CJ versus Fletcher. I mean, defensive tackles get paid more than that's. I mean, true. Part of it is that, and it's more. I don't. It's not necessarily more difficult, but look, the value of the position is a little bit higher, so that's baked into it as well. Yeah, I mean, I guess at the point when you have the 53-man roster, right? I'm not necessarily looking at the valuation. That's for the offseason. That's where we are right now.
But that's where we are right now.
That's fair. About that. That's fair. As far as football players and getting to the NFC Championship, getting that close to the Super Bowl, yeah, I still think Fletcher is a valuable player. It's a fair point to say, it's probably not $14 million valuable. But I get, you know what else makes him more valuable? Now you start talking about 10, so it's 10 versus 14. And now you don't have Javon Hargrave. So you damn well better not have Javon Hargrave and Fletcher Cox. Then you're really up a creek. So that factors into it as well. And you knew, Jody, you weren't bringing back. The Eagles knew they weren't bringing back Javon Hargrave. They knew it. They knew it. They knew he was going to get $20 million on the open market. He got $21 million. What can you do? You tip your hat and say, and that's why the plan was in place with Milton Williams. It's Milton Williams again, more than Jordan Davis, because it's a different position. The plan was in place. And I think that's a good young player, Milton Williams. I really do.
I think
he's not going to be Javon, but he's He's a good young player.
He will do a good job for them this year. I thought he took, if you were looking at players who at the end of the previous season and what they finished this past season with, I would say Milton Williams took as big a step as anybody not named Jalen Hurts on the Eagles, improving from one year to the next. And oh, by the way, he was behind Jordan Davis. And I know the Eagles played different fronts, but Davis and Fletcher and Javon were all here, so you only had so many snaps to play. An increased number of snaps from the previous year, but oh, believe me when I tell you, his snaps will increase even more. And I think he'll do a good job for the Eagles. The reason I brought it up is because I think Fletcher's the only one. And the bottom line is, when push comes to shove, because you made the best point there at the end, when you're subtracting Javon Hargrave, can you afford to also subtract Fletcher Cox? Chances are the answer is no. So if you got to overpay a little bit just to make sure you're not taking a massive step back at that position, you do it. And they did it with Fletcher Cox. He's the only one. They had to do what they did with Slay, because if not, and this is Howie. Howie's very good. We give him a ton of credit for being able to manage the cap, but from time to time, like he did this year, he paints himself into a bit of a corner with his retractable years at the back end. He did it again with Slay, cleaned it up, but he just pushed it on down the road because Slay's got years, I think, that go to like 2029 now. Or
Yeah.
At some point, you got to pay the piper on that. And
he basically redid his. But the thing is, now because the TV deal's in place, the Eagles now know the cap is going up incrementally over the next 5 years. So that's baked into it as well. But you're right. I mean, voidable years are a calculated gamble. But, there's a reason why everybody else is copying the Eagles, Jody, because everybody else is using voidable years now too. So can't be that bad of an idea.
No, but I'm just pointing out that at some point the bill comes due. You can't avoid it forever. You can keep pushing it along and pushing it along.
And it helps to have an owner, by the way, who is willing to eat dead money when you do make an evaluation mistake. Not evaluation like right. Carson Wentz. That Jeffrey Lurie's a big part of this as well, and people gloss over that, because there's a lot of owners that won't let you move on from mistakes, and Jeffrey's not one of them.
No, he gives Howie Roseman a lot of rope to play with to keep the Eagles in the best cap spots that they are, and he's done a good job again this year. But again, and I think maybe I don't know the numbers well enough. The theory of but the cap's going up. Yeah, but the cap's going up. We do know the cap's going up because it goes up every year. The percentages that they match up, that they line up for the chances you're taking. Here's the one thing you come back to, and I know you agree with me on this one because we feel exactly the same. The Eagles are an all-in team. I know they didn't win the Super Bowl last year. They were tied with 10 seconds ago. It'd be nice to have that feather in your cap, and it would make doing what they're doing that much easier had they won it, but they didn't. What do you want them to do? Take a step backwards?
Yeah,
to take
it
two
makes
forward?
That's what I was saying at the beginning. It's the Sam Hinkiization of Philadelphia. Why wouldn't you be all in? I mean, there are times where you have to take a step back and revamp. Yep. And by the way, that's where the Eagles were coming off the Doug Peterson era, and Jeffrey Lurie stated it. Hey, we got a different focus, and they got back really quick. So from that standpoint, what are you worried about? All right, if things don't go, they'll get back really quick. They've proven they can do it. I just don't get it. You're 10 seconds. You're tied with 10 seconds left in the Super Bowl, as you said, Jody. Why the hell wouldn't you be all in for the next season?
Makes no sense whatsoever. That's why I was a little surprised by Ruben's thing. And the biggest guy is Jason Kelce, because if you say, oh, they're too old, well, that's determined by your average roster player, and you add everybody and divide by how many plays. Well, Jason Kelce's going to run the number up. He's going to make you an older team because you're bringing him back. The alternative is Don't bring back the best player at the position that he plays in the NFL. What are you, nuts?
Yeah.
You got the best center in the NFL. What are
Yeah.
you going to do? Judge his age or judge his capabilities on the field? Oh, I think
Well,
I'll judge his capabilities
and
on the field.
we heard that argument with some people. You know, well, maybe you bring Isaac back. I mean, I love Isaac, Sam. I mean, come on. You know, with all due respect, Jason Kelsey can do what he wants. And if he wants to come back, the Eagles are going to welcome back with open arms. Now, at some point, yes, there's going to be a decline. There's going to be a significant decline. Maybe he gets out before then. It happens to everybody. But I mean, he was, if he wasn't the best center in football, he was number 2 to Creed Humphrey, who you also saw in the Super Bowl last season. So again, why in the hell would you want to move on from Jason Kelsey? Sam Hinkie broke this city. Why? You have the best player because he's a little bit older? I mean, you just can't think like that.
No.
And you know, I'm with people. I always say it, you know, better to give up on a player a year early than a year late, all that stuff. But not when you're a contender. There's also spots, you know, if you're the Chicago Bears, who we talked about a lot over the past week or so, they're in a different spot than the Eagles. They're rebuilding. All right. So they don't want a 35-year-old anything, because when they do get good to be in a position to make a run, those players aren't going to be relevant.
Right.
There are different spots. So I get it from the Sixers standpoint back in the day. Yeah, they were tanking. They don't want anybody with any credibility, anybody helping them win games. That's a different spot. When you're a significant contender, you don't think like you're the Sixers tanking. And too many people think that way. It's bizarre to me.
Makes no sense whatsoever. And that's why I was a little surprised by those that were suggesting, yeah, but they didn't get younger during the, no kidding, they didn't get younger because they're still trying to win a Super Bowl. And they've got players that a year older are as good as anybody else at their position. So you're not just going to cast them aside or move over or churn your roster because, oh, we have to get younger as an entire team. No, you don't. And they didn't. Like I said, the only one who I thought got overpaid by a little bit, I'm not saying, oh, my God, what the hell were they thinking re-signing him, was Fletcher. I don't think he's a $10 million player anymore, but when you factor everything in, that they lost Javon Hargrave in the same offseason, yeah, they probably had to overpay him. Kelsey, no. Slay, no. The guys that they brought back. Now, here's the one thing I will say about the corners. And, you know, I was on Bradbury's bandwagon when he was still wearing giant blue. As a matter of fact, if those guys both get old fast at the same time this upcoming season, that could hurt. That could hurt. And I'm not saying I'm projecting it or predicting it. You want a prediction out of me? I think they're both going to be top flight corners again this year, and the Eagles are going to be good with it. But at corners, sometimes you do see that drastic drop off just from one year to the next. He got old fast. The Eagles can't afford that at corner. They made a commitment to both of those two guys, at least financially, that they need them to stay at that high level, certainly for 2023, if not 2024. If there's one spot where I say, all right, they're out on a little bit of thin ice, not telling you it's going to crack. I'm just suggesting if it does, you're in trouble.
And by the way, our buddy Dave Zangaro got the numbers for both Slay and Bradbury's contracts. Very, very team friendly. So
is it or aren't they?
Well,
Again,
they are.
I read the same article you did. Team friendly now. But if Slay all of a sudden gets old this year, they're back in as bad, if not a worse position going forward with dead money on the cap. Like I said, they got the years going to 2029. that's team friendly now, but team friendly can turn into team ugly pretty quickly.
Yeah, but I mean, look, you're right, Jody. I mean, if anybody goes in the toilet as a player, it's bad news. But it doesn't change the fact that the contract is team friendly. So, Carson Wentz, that's the best example. That was a good contract by the Eagles. They got the player wrong. They got the player went in the toilet. But for where he was at the stage of when they signed that contract, I will argue to my dying day that was a good contract by the Eagles. But they misevaluated the player. Now, in Slay's case, we've already seen he's played for years. He's not going to break down mentally or anything like that. He's just a really good player. It's a matter of, all right, does he hit the wall from a physical standpoint, age, and all that? But they can get out of it in 2 years. And by the way, the one thing Dave didn't get, and I'll try to talk to him and see what the deal is, because I think he described it as a guaranteed option bonus in 2024. Now, I've mentioned this. What does that mean? Whose option is it? Is it the team's option? Is it the player's option? Is it the third day of the league year that the Eagles can just wipe their hands of it? And there'll be some cap implications there. But I think that's a very important part. We still don't know. But if we start this process and the guy's making $17.5 million a year with a $26 million cap hits, and he ends up, getting a signing bonus of $10.12 million for this year, you're knocked down from where he was, and you get all that cap space. They generated, I'm trying to find the exact number, $14.23 million of cap space.
Yeah, they had to.
I mean, yeah, that's a good deal from the
Understood.
Eagles perspective.
But where I think you and I separate just a little bit is when you get the details of a new contract being done, either free agent signing or an extension like it is in Slay, you absolutely put forth an opinion on, is this team friendly, player friendly? Who got the better of it? Where does it position them? And on that given day, you can absolutely have a winner and a loser. But then the evaluation goes on. You can't just say, because the day you signed it, it was team friendly. That makes it team friendly forever. No, it doesn't. Then you actually have to play. Then you have to actually evaluate. Then you have to actually look at the long range effects of it. And you can say, well, that didn't quite work out the way it was supposed to.
Well, no, and that's why I said that's where we differ. I mean, look, there's a cost of doing business in the NFL. I mean, there's I mean, you have a good quarterback, a Pro Bowl quarterback, you got to pay him. Now, does he turn into a bad quarterback like Carson Wentz afterwards? You really have to struggle to find a collapse like Carson Wentz. So that's sort of an outlier. But I mean, it happens. We saw it happen. We saw it happen here. I mean, Darius Slay's a 5-time Pro Bowl cornerback. There's a cost of doing business with a 5-time Pro Bowl cornerback. There's a cost of doing business with a second-team All-Pro cornerback like James Bradbury. You're not going to get those guys for $5 million. So in case that they do crap the bed in the future, which probably isn't going to happen, as we both agree with. But if it does, it doesn't change that you have to do business in the NFL, and you're not getting 5-time Pro Bowl cornerbacks for $5 million. I mean, that's just not how it works. So I can't, that's why I don't see that side of the argument. If you get the evaluation of any player wrong, whether it's a draft pick, whether it's a veteran, whether it's a free agent signing, it's not good. But that to me is a different conversation than the valuation of a player in the moment. That's what
I think the general manager has to be judged on both.
They do. They are.
Separate church and state. I think you got to bring them together at the end of a contract. You got to bring them together and say, how'd it work out? Yeah. In the moment, you can cut a great deal, but if for whatever reason, valuation, evaluation, performance, it all comes together at some point. And you go, well, did that work or not? And that's what I think you're eventually judged on. You can look at it and go, hey, at the time, I'm sorry, that was a good deal. But it became a non-good deal because the player.
Well, that's all GMs. All GMs are ever graded on by the fan base as the players. That's it. Now you can get in good with Jeffrey Lurie and the owners by doing your job in the proper way, and that's what Howie has done. But ultimately, you're judged on the players. You're judged on how good the player is. Jalen Reagor sucks. Howie, you're an idiot.
That's on Howie, yeah.
Darius Slay makes a 6th Pro Bowl, and James Bradbury's an All-Pro, and Howie's the greatest thing that ever lived. But owners value that he does his job correctly.
Understood, and that's why Howie Roseman's going nowhere fast. Jeffrey Lurie appreciates Howie Roseman, even though every once in a while a percentage of the fan base will go, what the hell's Howie thinking? All right, we are bringing in next Mike Tanier from Football Outsiders, one of the best national writers in the country. We'll punch him up, get his thoughts on where the Birds are at and the entire National Football League. Mike give us a good national perspective. Mike Tanier, Football Outsiders, and the New York Times next with us here on Birds 365.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
Imagine for a moment that you went to work today and when you came home, you were catastrophically injured. Your life and your family's life. That's what happened to union construction worker Mike Little.
I was scared of what the end was going to be, but to be 100% honest with you, I knew I was going to be all right just by talking with Brian. In my heart, I just knew everything was going to be all right.
Call the firm and find out why they say, "We got this." Call 215-458-2222.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wild wood days.
My name is Fran Salerno, and I'm a managing director here at Del Valle Insurance Group. Been in the business for over 36 years, saving people money on their insurance needs. Give us a call. Let us help you custom design an insurance plan that meets both your needs and budget.
They're carving them up and good play calling along the way. First and goal at the 6.
On the field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Thursday get together here on Birds 365, 5 weeks away from the NFL draft. We're not going to ask him that much about the draft. Maybe a question or two today. We'll get him back on later when we get a little bit closer to the draft. Always good talking about not only Eagles, but the entire National Football League with Mike Tanier from footballoutsiders.com. They keeping you busy this offseason, Mr. Tanier.
We are nothing but busy this offseason. But I'll tell you, you guys didn't tell me it was a black pullover shirt.
No, it always is. But that's, the green screen.
That makes sense.
You always got to wear it dark. So
Gotcha.
something there. So I go with the Johnny Cash look every day. But Mike, I'll start with one of your favorite topics, the great Aaron Rodgers. Maybe a little ayahuasca tea. Who's got the leverage here? The Jets or the Packers? Because, everybody back and forth. I don't think the Packers have much leverage. They're not going to pay the guy, whatever it is, $60 million. So what has taken this so long?
The Jets don't have a lot of leverage either, because if they don't do this, they do not have a quarterback. They're going into the season where they have built for, I guess, a deep playoff run. I think that's where they think they're at. And you can't go into this saying, well, you know what, that fizzled out. Sorry, guys, we're going to go grab Carson Wentz. You can't do that if you're Joe Douglas. So,
you just scared Jody.
What's happening here is they all have time until the draft. Everybody's got time until the draft. Nobody's in the facilities. Nobody's worried about somebody showing up for OTAs. So neither Gutekunst or Douglas has to make the move here. So they can play a little bit of a staring contest. I think when we get to that draft and they're looking at that first round pick the Jets have, the 2 second round picks the Jets have, and they say, what's it going to take? That's where the potential that the Packers say, all right, we call your bluff. We're going to pay him all this money. And the Jets say, okay, well, we're going to draft a guy whether you like him or not. That's where both sides are going to say this is untenable, and that's when they're going to pull the trigger.
All right, let's say the deal gets worked out, whatever it is, a 1 or 2 twos, future, whatever the payment is, it's not outrageous. The Packers don't rob the Jets. The Jets don't hoodwink the Packers. The compensation's the compensation. Here's my concern from a Jet perspective. Is this guy committed to the New York Jets? I know he came out of the darkness after a ayahuasca bath and said, I want to be a New York Jet. But is he truly committed to going in and at age 40 going, yeah, I'm going to work hard. I'm going to rally the troops. I'm going to be the leader. We know how talented he is, but is he just going to connect with his teammates and the coaching staff and be the leader that the Jets need at QB?
The guy who said he was 90% sure he was retired before he went into his
in the darkness. 90%.
Into the darkness.
Yeah.
Before he went goth, the guy who has gone out of his way not to connect with his coaches since about 2014 or so, the guy who's gone out of his way to only connect with a very select group of his teammates. Yeah, we all see this. We all see the same thing. Is this guy? He's going to come in. He's going to want to play his favorites. The Jets are bringing his favorites in. They brought Lazard in. They brought in Hackett. They're moving things around to accommodate him. And the likelihood that he's coming in and I hate to say like a cash grab, but the likelihood where he's coming in and at the first sign of things not being the way he likes it, he's going to be like, oh well, we have to have a talk about this. That's brutally high. That is brutally high for the Jets. And, this is obviously something I think comes in at the ownership level. I don't think Joe Douglas hates the idea of bringing Aaron Rodgers in, but I think he's already realizing this is a bit of a Faustian bargain. And I'll say this, the Vegas line right now for the Jets is 9.5. The house is built in the idea that Rodgers is there, and they're building him at 9.5.
Oh, yeah.
You are doing this to win 10 games. This is everything, not to win the Super Bowl, not to be better than the Bills up there with the Chiefs, to win 10 games with a 40-year-old quarterback. I would be very nervous if I were the Jets. I'd be very nervous about if I were a Jets fan.
Is there any value to that? I mean, we talk about it all the time, and you guys do so much great analytical work. And there is this, I think it's more of a modern thought, certainly, that, as you mentioned, 10 wins with a 40-year-old quarterback, what's that really worth versus 3 wins and getting a ton of draft capital, sort of like what Chicago has done.
Right.
On the other hand, you have the Jets and their history, as Jody can tell you, and in deep pain. They've been this way. They haven't been improving. So is there, how much value is there to winning 10 games with a 40-year-old quarterback? Because he will win 10 games.
Yeah. And it's tricky because if you ask Jet fans, they'll say, we'll take it. It's been a 12-year playoff drought. We will take this and run with it. And it's like, well, if that makes the fans happy, that's something. There's a difference between, what you've got in Joe Douglas is a 4th-year, 5th-year GM and Robert Saleh, who's a 3rd-year coach, saying we need to show progress. 10 wins shows progress. Nobody gets fired. Nobody has to put the house up for sale. There's something logical to doing that. The question is, are you just delaying things a year? I'll tell you right now, if they'd gone out and gotten Derek Carr, who's a lesser quarterback, but would come in with a highly motivated to continue his career thing, they'd probably be at about 9.5 wins right now. We'd be talking about 10 wins, but we'd also be talking about somebody who's more affordable, somebody who gives them 2 or 3 years to grow. It's just very sketchy to say. It's one thing to say, hey, look, we showed progress. We're a playoff team now. And we're a playoff team, but our quarterback is 41, and we have to move heaven and earth to compensate him. 2 very different things to balance if you're the Jets.
Nah, and since we went quarterback, I'm staying quarterback with you, Mike, but I'm moving it here to Philadelphia. But it's not an analytic you can look up at Football Outsiders. You can use it to buttress your opinion, but I need an opinion on just goodwill.
Yes.
The Eagles are going to try and get a contract extension done with Jalen Hurts. Everybody knows it. Everybody's talking about it. At some point, it will outweigh everything else the Eagles are doing. And I don't think it's just going to come together the way that some other people do. I think this is going to drag on. I don't think you're getting a Burrow deal done anywhere. You don't think you're getting a Herbert deal done. And Lamar Jackson, Mike Tanier's getting almost as much free agent attention as Lamar Jackson is these days. So nobody's moving the needle on the quarterbacks and the new structure of contracts in the NFL. Is there a date that you would have in mind where you go, all right, yeah, now this is going to start to be a problem because they haven't gotten anything done, because they haven't moved any closer, that the fan base is going to start to go, yeah, why didn't we get that his teammates, and this is probably the biggest one, we're going to see our first pay the man tweet.
Yeah.
You got a grasp on the timeline on how this works as to when it, right now it's, they'll get it done. At some point, that's not going to be the case. How does it work over the course of the next couple months?
That's right. It is March 23rd. It is March 23rd right now. So it's like, why isn't this deal done? That's you're still like
not there yet, but we're gonna get there at some point, Mike.
We'll get there. Let's look at where we are in July as camp approaches, and let's look at the trio of quarterbacks, because I think one of the factors in terms of the urgency is this a Jalen Hurts situation, or is this a third year entering fourth year quarterback situation where everyone can see around the league that like 3 different teams are trying to converge on this? So I think the urgency will heat up closer to the summer. I think they're going to get free agency. They're going to get the draft, look at the budget, look at the long-term budget, and start making offers. And my gut tells me the Eagles will get in ahead of the Chargers and the Bengals, in part because Howie works more quickly and with more intentionality than those 2 teams, and because Lurie has more money than those 2 teams.
They don't. Cleveland, Cincinnati doesn't have the money to put in escrow to pay Joe Burrow.
Right?
They don't. They have a problem.
They have a problem. They just paid Orlando Brown, so that's putting some money in escrow. They've got a plan to play Jamar Chase. That's putting some money in escrow. They lost some of their safeties and some of their guys already because they can't put it together. I don't think the Chargers are in that boat anymore, but a couple of years ago, the Chargers.
Yeah, a couple of years ago they were.
Yeah. And overlaid on all of this is I don't think any of these agents are going to ask for a Deshaun Watson guarantee. But the GMs are going to try and create a guarantee structure. I think everyone's going to be looking to ring a $200 million bell. And I think it's going to be onus is on Howie to be like, well, you know what? The official guarantee is actually going to be 130. I don't know, pull a number in there. But then there's a roster bonus 2024 that kicks in for 2025. All that kind of bells and whistles type of thing to get that. So that's going to take time. I don't think we're going to see urgency, though, until we're getting closer to camp and everybody's got to walk through that door.
Yeah.
And then
I've told Jody, if you go back to Carson Wentz, June 1st is a big day.
Yes.
They signed Carson Wentz, I think it was June 6th, because the Eagles get things done early. Most teams, though, do what Mike just said, beginning of camp. Everybody goes on vacation. People don't believe. They don't do anything. They're on vacation like everybody else. They're not talking. They're not doing anything. Then they get back in advance of camp. All right, let's get stuff done.
Yeah.
That happened with Landon Dickerson. We had that discussion. Draft picks don't hold out anymore. I said they're going to sign him. They're going to sign him. They're going to sign him. But they didn't get it done before. They got it done after they got back from vacation. So there are certain days on the NFL calendar that are a big deal. June 1st, one of them.
Yes.
Start of training camp, another. I think you're right. We'll see how it shakes out, though. Mike, I do want to sort of bring it both together, what we were talking about, and Howie Roseman. I talk about this a lot. Jeffrey Lurie and Jimmy Kempski asked Howie this, our buddy, before the Super Bowl. You know, how much is it a luxury that you don't have to? You just talked about Joe Douglas. He's got a GM for his job, so to speak. You know, he's got to show improvement. That's why you go after a 40-year-old quarterback.
Right.
Howie's so entrenched, he gets to do things other general managers don't get to do. Right. How big of an advantage do you think that is for the Eagles?
I think it's demonstrated what a big advantage it is when this team went from the Super Bowl to the pits to the Super Bowl again in the course of 6 seasons. There have been whole swaths of franchises who've been in rebuilding mode that entire time. And the Eagles built, collapsed, and built again in that time. You look at teams like the Detroit Lions, the Cleveland Browns, the Jets, obviously. You can go to these other teams. Teams like the Steelers, who are really well-run organizations, have been like, oh, we're like 9 and 10 wins every year for that entire period and didn't have the highs. So that's an advantage. I say, though, it's only really an advantage as long as Howie is working in concert with the coaching staff, because the continuity at the general manager position and the ability to like make these bold cross-court pass type trades, acquisitions only works if the coaches are saying, we're the ones who need these players. This is what this is our type. This is our need. This is our long-term expectation. So you kind of had it with Peterson, then you lost it with Peterson, and now you seem to have it with Sirianni. So that's a strength. If it starts being friction, and I think it was friction a couple of times there along the way over the last 12 years, then that becomes the problem.
All right, Mike, need your take on this one because it became a talking point here in town, as it should have, because he showed up. Bijan Robinson is a potential Eagle draft pick.
Oh, heavens.
Now, we continue to state that the Eagles don't take running backs. Well, history's history. Facts are facts. They just haven't. Right. But the Eagles also like to be cutting edge. John was just talking about everybody's doing voidable years now. Howie might have been the first, but everybody in the league is doing it and putting it. So the Eagles like setting the agenda for the league too and being ahead of the curve. Drafting a running back with the number 10 pick in a draft would certainly be resetting the curve again. Hasn't been done since Saquon Barkley. Any chance Eagles to go down that road just when we think, oh, it'll never happen, it'll never happen? Howie does a switcheroo again and says, yeah, we'll dictate terms for the entire league.
No. No. Roseman is analytics oriented. He's well aware of what happens if you take a running back that high. Even in terms of the fifth-year option you would have to put in front of that running back if he had a couple of good years. Now, if Bijan is there at about 30, where the Eagles pick 30?
30, yeah, 30.
Then there's a logic there. And what happens is the entire compensation package differs. And, of course, it's different. He's your second first-round pick probably, and you went out and you got one of these edges or a defensive tackle or just the best available athlete. So I don't see it happening. Bijan is remarkable because I do a lot of, around the country radio. Fans want Bijan.
Oh, yeah. Well, they always want the skilled player, the sexy player. The Eagles are built on, Jody and I were talking about it early in the show, Mike, the core four, Jason Kelsey.
Yes.
Offensive line, Lane Johnson, offensive line, Brandon Graham, defensive line, Fletcher Cox, defensive line.
Yes.
Everybody still wants the running back, the receiver.
Right.
It doesn't register.
Right. I talking to Falcons fans, like the Falcons are going to bring in Bijan Robinson. Like the Falcons are going to get a running back. You don't have anything. You just not have anything, but you actually have okay running backs. You just want a guy that you watched at Texas, and he is amazing. But I do not see the Eagles bringing Bijan. Long story short.
Yeah. All right. League as a whole. Who have made the biggest improvements? Everybody, the Bears had $6 zillion in cap space and totally tore it down. So obviously they've gotten some good players, improved. Although I don't know about paying $92 million to all ball linebackers, but they obviously improved talent wise. But I look at Detroit and I look at Dallas. Am I wrong or am I right, Mike Tanier?
You are absolutely right, and it is bad news for Eagles fans that the Cowboys really have improved. And I think we know what the Eagles are trying to do is trying to prevent like a complete collapse of this team, and that's what they've been working on. Yeah, it's like, we got Slay back, got Bradbury back, you get Graham back, Kelsey unretires, and it's like, well, there's no way you can keep Hargrave in that situation, etc. So they're holding serve. The Cowboys are legitimately improving. Okay, Stephon Gilmore is a legitimate improvement at cornerback. It gives them bookend corners. Brandon Cooks on a short deal when his head's in the game with a quarterback who can throw, not Davis Mills, but Dak Prescott, is a heck of a guy to be your wide receiver too. And it looks like the Cowboys have built in part to be able to counter the Eagles with these guys. It's like, okay, we can pass rush, we can cover. We have guys now who can cover both Smitty and A.J. Brown, and we've got more weapons on offense. You mentioned the Lions also. Lions were another team with lots of money, lots of draft picks, just completely just kind of bought a secondary.
Yeah.
They just bought a second. C.J. Gardner Johnson. They brought in
Cam Sutton from Pittsburgh.
Emmanuel Mosley, when healthy, heck of a player.
Yeah.
The other team I would add is the Browns have done a very good job adding players, and I got to pull it up real quick. They just made a trade yesterday for Elijah Moore. They needed sort of a guy who can gobble up passes over the middle. They were terrible at defensive tackle. They went out and they got Dalvin Tomlinson, who's a pretty good player. Tristan Hill, who's like a space heater. They've done a lot to do what the Browns need to do, which is they better win soon because they're paying $6 billion to this guy at quarterback.
Let me ask you about Brandon Cooks. I know this is not necessarily, it's kind of like more TMZ-ish than football outsider-ish.
Yeah.
Why is Brandon Cooks traded every 20 minutes? He's a nice receiver. He puts up good numbers. He never gets to free agency. He always signs an extension with somebody, but after he's traded to them, what's the deal? Is he just a malingerer? Or because the numbers look good on paper. When I watch him play, I go, that guy can make plays, but he continues to change teams. What's the deal with Brandon Cooks?
Yeah, the other thing is you never hear anything. There's nothing ever like, oh, well, here was an arrest or here was a
right. He's not on a police blotter.
No. Not at all. And like I've never gotten a coach or GM even like mumbly saying something bad about him. Now, what happened in Houston? There was a regime change last year. Okay, and there was an individual by the name of Jack Easterby who was kind of operating as showrunner for that team, sort of above the GM, below the ownership group, and he was a unique character. Let's put it that way. And all the scuttlebutt was that Brandon Cooks was like his guy, one of his guys. Okay. When the regime change happened, Cooks was not happy with that, was specifically not happy with that, and was also playing on a team that was very bad, has been very bad for a couple of years, didn't have outstanding quarterback play. So over the last year, it was clear that Cooks was not happy and was just a terrible fit where he was in Houston. That part we know. What I don't know is why it was so often before that teams were so eager to move on, because again, you never got like a real paper trail of why.
I think when Brandon does hang it up, I've argued, Mike, that he should sign a 1-day contract with every team that traded for him and retire as the most traded player. Because this is baseball. I mean, trades like this don't happen in football, and he's been a very good player. It doesn't make sense on so many levels.
Yeah.
But I do think he's an improvement for the Cowboys, unfortunately for Eagles fans.
Exactly.
Do you have a bad contract for us when you look around and say, "Whoa, what the hell is this?"
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the off-ball linebackers, and that was one. Although when you really look at those deals, it's kind of like they're front-loaded. Like we just got money to burn right now.
Yeah.
And we might as well bring in some dudes. I gotta pull it up right now. Mike McGlinchey was very good.
Mike,
Very
good player, but
right tackle. And the Broncos bring him in 5 years, $87.5 million reported, $35 million fully guaranteed. And I'm looking at this, and the cap hits come in big. And this is a cap-strapped Broncos team that is trying to like build something around Russell Wilson, or maybe build for a future without Russell Wilson. And as soon as the McGlinchey signs this deal, Jerry Jeudy is like on the trade block, and everything we hear is receiver Jerry Judy's on the block. I've heard that Sutton might be on the block, the other receiver. So what are you doing? Super paying your right tackle and then rebuilding your receiving core. That's like robbing Peter to pay Paul.
I'm disappointed. I like George Payton. And I'm disappointed with what's going on. Now, part of it's getting things wrong with they got the coach wrong. I mean, Nathaniel Hackett was a disaster. But, Peyton was sort of like, he was like a mini Eric DaCosta. He never left. He would get interview after interview, and he's saying, I'm not leaving. I'm going to stick with Rick Spielman. Yeah. And for years, he had this great reputation. He finally goes, all right, this is it. I'm going to take the Denver job. And it hasn't worked out. Oof.
Nice drafting, but although some of the draft picks have gotten
drafting, was good.
And you had this big whiff there. And the other thing is ownership group, new ownership group in Denver. There's some people involved in that ownership group who sound like they're hands-on. Okay. Maybe some people who are used to having an incredible amount of power in this world who are going to be hands-on in that team. They who think they can order tanks and helicopters around and now hang Russell Wilson around. So there's a little bit of friction there that seems to have impacted the coaching search for Sean Payton and maybe impacting things as well.
All right. I'm going to ask a similar question to John, but more specific on position. And that's good and bad contracts with quarterbacks. If we take Derek Carr and Jimmy Garoppolo, put them on the side, they're brought in unquestionable to be their starters for their teams. Everyone else is at best competing for a job. Heineke in Atlanta and Dalton in Carolina hold down the fort if the rookie's not ready to play day number one. Yeah. Jacoby Brissett, Mike White, Case Keenum. Who did the best of the other quarterbacks, either pure backups, unquestioned backups, or, they'll get a chance to compete. If they're the starter, they're only going to be the starter for a period of time before someone else takes over. Who contract-wise, who fit-wise do you think made a nice agreement and made a questionable agreement if you got one of each?
I'll go with the nice agreement. The Commanders bringing in Brissett. Brissett is better than Heineke because he's more reliable on a throw-by-throw basis. He's better than Carson Wentz because his head will be in the game for everything that he's being called upon to do. So they actually upgraded over last year's quarterbacks, and Brissett comes in, and again, he is a team-first winner mentality type of guy who comes into a team who has decent receivers and decent offensive line and has a great defensive lineup. I'm not saying the Commanders are a playoff team, but they're going to be tough outs, and it's not going to be that sort of jokey thing when you play the Commanders with Brissett there. So he could hold off Sam Howell. He could hold off a rookie, so to speak. Really, I don't think there's any really bad fits about that group. I will say the whole idea that, wherever Baker Mayfield goes, he brings this clickbait tendency with him, and he's going into Tampa. Folks, he's going into Tampa because Tampa is economizing, and they're just kicking tires randomly on a guy who had buzz, a year or two ago. The idea that he's going to rejuvenate his career at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and, sign a 6-year deal and be Brady's heir apparent. That's storytelling.
I'm seeing that, huh, Mike?
Yeah. At Mike Tanier, follow Mike on Twitter. Does a tremendous job at Football Outsiders. Contributor at the New York Times as well. So you can read Mike all over the place. I'll end up with the Eagles backup quarterback, Marcus Mariota. They finally did the deal 8 years, whatever the hell it was, late. But Marcus is finally here. What did you see from him last year? Obviously, it didn't end well in Atlanta. It's flamed out now twice as a starter. But looks like a solid backup in this league, and the Eagles always value that position.
Yeah, he looks like a solid backup who fits the system. Early in the season, Mariota was playing well within a very tight structure. And it became clearer and clearer as the weeks went on with the Falcons that he had to be very strictly within that structure, that the deep balls were not going to get down the field with any kind of real velocity, etc. And again, the biggest issue is when they went to Desmond Ridder, which he should have anticipated. Yeah. He did not handle it well and went AWOL. So he should be coming in with the proper mentality here. I think it's a fine pickup. I think he's a upgrade over Gardner Minshew in that position, frankly.
All right, here's a position that I know I share with my partner. We think of it the same. I want to get yours in it as well, because this is the lead up to the week with the owners and the competition committee putting forth potential rule changes, which will then go to vote. The one that's gotten the most attention, certainly here in Philadelphia, is the tush push. The can you use a secondary player to push a quarterback forward for a first down? John and I see this the same. A lot of Eagle fans are ticked off that they're even talking about this because Jalen Hurts was so good at it last year.
Right.
If they made it illegal, I think that would actually benefit the Eagles because their quarterback's still going to be able to get it because he's a beast, and other teams' quarterbacks aren't. How do you think they handled the tush push this offseason? Will it be re-ruled in the NFL?
I don't think they have the votes. And I think to get the votes, and you have to say there would have to be injury evidence. You know, all it taken was one injury where it was very clear that, like, oh, you pushed him and he hit his head. So unless they like preemptively say that that's a risk, I don't think they have the votes. And I don't look at it from an Eagles standpoint in this respect. I look at it from a football standpoint. I would rather see tush pushes than punts. Okay, and I would rather see defenses trying to be innovative somewhere along the way and say we're going to come up with a way to combat this. Than the idea that they're like, oh, it's legislated away. You don't have to worry about this sort of thing anymore. So I think it's interesting. I think teams should keep it. And I don't think right now there's enough votes to overturn it.
All right. When we get the vote, we vote for Mike Tenure joining us anytime we can get him here on Birds 365. We appreciate you going black like the two hosts. Thank you much for that. Always good to see you, Mike. And we'll get you back up in a couple of weeks.
Absolutely. Take care, guys.
Thanks, Mike.
Your footballoutsiders.com. Check out the website. It's good analyst work, analysis, analytics as you're going to find out there these days. All right, he's Johnny Mac, Jody Mac. You know what we got to do? We got to come back. We've got to put a bow on the show. Wrap it up on Thursday next here on Birds 365.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
I get scared sometimes.
Of a lot of things.
Joining in.
Decisions.
The dark.
The dark.
But I once heard someone say,
But as I always say,
it's okay to be afraid.
as long as you face the fear.
And keep moving forward.
Wherever you are in life, count on the name trusted in insurance for over 80 years. Independence Blue Cross. Is the best vacation one that you find, or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights, or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm, or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Plan your day with confidence.
Keep the umbrellas on hand.
With Action News and AccuWeather.
Numerous tornadoes.
Your go-to team when severe weather strikes.
The water is still rising.
Keeping you prepared wherever you watch. Action News and AccuWeather, the team you trust.
We all know that taxes are just part of life. It's true during our working years, but also in retirement. But what you might not know is up to 85% of your Social Security benefits might be taxed. Our team at Thrive Financial has helped retire thousands of people across the Delaware Valley by asking questions they never knew they needed to ask, including how their Social Security benefits might be taxed. It's time to be proactive on taxes. Get your Thrive Retirement Tax Playbook today.
As a hardworking American, you've never experienced how tough life can be until now. A catastrophic injury while working on the job. A personal injury from someone else's negligence. Turned away by other law firms in the region who didn't bother to learn your story. It's time to meet the Fritz & Bianculli Law Firm and managing partner Brian Fritz. Badly injured? Call the Fritz & Bianculli Law Firm. Find out why they say, "We got this."
The bow on the show here on Birds 365 Thursday edition. We'll wrap up the week mañana. Thanks to both John Stolnis from Bleeding Green Nation and Mike Tanier from Football Outsiders for jumping in and doing guest spots with us today. All right, Johnny, you got any new Eagle meet and greets scheduled today?
No, the only guy we haven't met is Marcus Mariota. He's in Hawaii, so we're not going to get to
You
see
didn't get
him.
the assignment from Sports Illustrated to fly to Hawaii and
Yeah, we were joking about that yesterday.
Mariota, no?
We were joking about that to get the trip to Honolulu, but that's not going to happen. So I don't think Marcus is going to get introduced, at least because remember the NFL meetings are next week in Arizona. So Howie and Jeffrey are going to be out there early in the week. So I would say not even next week, probably the week after that before we get to see Marcus Mariota. And we also haven't talked to the coordinators yet. So the Eagles are waiting for the entire coaching staff to be put in place.
What do they got left on the I know assistant quarterback coach because
they hired a D-backs coach, and that's pretty much it. But they're working out some titles, maybe some quality control guys. But there's always some promotions and things like that. So titles are a big thing in the NFL now.
Sure.
Joe.
Oh, yeah. That dictates what you can and can't block. You have to give them permission to go interview with another team, not if it's a lateral move. So, yeah, titles are pretty damn important. When do you think you will get a chance to talk? Because you and I are on the same page here. Sorry to interrupt. About and it sounds like we're both questioning Brian Johnson. I'm not. I like the guy, and he's very well spoken about across the entire league. I think it's more of a tip of the cap to Shane Steichen.
Shane, yeah. I look at the difference between Nick and Shane. I mean, Shane was a better play caller than Nick. I'm sorry.
Results are in. That's exactly the way it happened.
It's Nick's offense, and Nick's a big part of putting everything together. But as far as the feel from play to play to play, Shane was really, really good at it. And I think people underestimate that aspect of it. But as I said with John, I think, the Eagles are so good offensively. I think, they're going to out-talent people. But that's not an insult to Brian Johnson. That's rare when somebody comes in and has that kind of feel as Shane Steichen did.
And we continue to talk about the fact that he's known the quarterback forever. Knowing a guy, being on the same page as a guy, being simpatico with the guy is all very good and it's plus, but then actually calling the right play in the right moment at the right time, and no matter how well you know the quarterback, doesn't mean you're absolutely going to call the right play. So, yeah, I think that is something that we have to keep our eye on. So you don't want to venture a guess as to when you are going to get your first chance to ask Brian Johnson.
Same thing not next week, but the week after would be my guess. And then we'll get to meet some of the assistants as well, the new assistants. And that'll be sort of staggered up to the draft. But yeah, that'll start. That process will start. But next week is the league meeting, so they'll be back on Wednesday. I don't think there'll be anything Thursday or Friday, but that's just a guess.
All right, before they leave for the league meetings, will Howie Roseman sign another Tier 2 free agent? Because we're certainly past Tier 1. We're well into Tier 2, depending on how finite you want to be in breaking down the tiers. Will Howie sign another guy before the
I think there's a good chance. They still need to add talent. They're always picking over, trying to find. They made it very clear that they're not done at safety. So Adrian Amos is still out there. That's the name I keep focusing on because he's got a history with Sean Desai. And he's a good player, not a great player, but he would fix, to the point where you don't have to pay him a lot of money. And you could feel comfortable saying you don't have to reach for anything. But we'll see. I mean, they're going to sign more players, no question about that. But they're all going to be in that same theme. They're not going to risk compensatory picks. It's going to be one-year deals at this point. And, you're hoping for Chris Long or LeGarrette Blount or, Patrick Robinson.
but you're not sure it's going to be that skilled blocking wide receiver to replace Zach Pascal.
Boy, you won't let me down on that. I just, it's a nice luxury to have. Is all.
Luxury being the key word. That's right. You've got that right, Johnny Mac. It's a luxury. That's why I'm
luxury to have, and they're not getting it because they're
not sweating that all that much. All right, J Mac, good show today. I'm going to come back tomorrow. How about you?
Yeah, I'll keep getting my Zach Pascal comeuppance. But I'll be here for it.
It's a Football Friday with McMullen and McDonald here in 2 and 2.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate inside the locker room and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.